Hey everybody, we are back for another week here at Number Curls. I am your host, Christine. I am the CEO and co-founder of Number Curls, where we help women learn to love, understand, and embrace their natural hair. And today's topic is one that you don't want to miss. And here it is. It's a juicy one too. 3 reasons why you struggle with your hair growth. In this video, although it will help everybody, this is especially going to help my Black women and my women of color, because when it comes to these 3 things, they're things that we really don't realize how much it is negatively impacting our hair growth. One thing that I'm always telling people is that your hair is growing. This is a blanket statement. There are some people whose hair is not growing, but for the most part, your hair is growing for the average person. But what makes a difference is, are you doing what's necessary to help your hair growth to be as optimized as possible? And so basically what this means is, if you were to think about just a seed, you have an apple seed, you have an avocado seed, you have an orange seed, any kind of seed that you can think about. You take that seed and it has to be planted into the right type of ground, right? It has to have the right type of soil or fertilizer that's going to help with that growth of that seed. Then you have to water that seed, and then that seed has to have proper sunlight. And when it has all of the combination of those things, then you're going to see that seed grow. But if you have a seed that isn't put in the right soil, that doesn't have the right nutrients in that soil or fertilizer to come and help if the soil's nutrients aren't good enough and sufficient, if that plant isn't being watered properly or getting the proper sunlight, then yes, you may see that plant grow, but it might be stunted in the growth. Or even if the plant has already broken up from the ground, if you notice, if you have a house plant and you don't water it enough, or if it's not getting enough sunlight, that plant is going to wither and die. And so when it comes to our hair and hair growth, it is the exact same thing. And so it wasn't until, I want to say within the past 2 years, that I found out about how significant these 3 things are. And how women of color and Black women are unfortunately put at a disadvantage when it comes to these things. So a lot of times we think, oh, my hair isn't growing because I'm Black and I don't know how to take care of my hair. And while that may be true in some instances, when it comes to these 3 things, there's a method behind some of the hair growth issues that we're seeing, but we're going to jump right into it and we're going to break it down so that you understand how you can be empowered to have the best hair growth that you can see, how your hair growth can be optimized, and how you can have the hair that you desire. So let's jump into it. The first thing is going to be water. I don't know about you, but most of my life I was told that our hair does not like water, to avoid wetting your hair at all costs. And unfortunately, our hair loves water. If you know me, you know I'm a foodie. I love anything potato, especially a French fry. I will do whatever I can to make sure that I can get some French fries at the end of the day. And our hair is the same way. That's why we see shrinkage with our hair, because our hair is constantly pulling moisture out of the air because it is dehydrated. That is your hair basically saying, if you go outside and your hair frizzes up, that is your hair basically saying, I am dehydrated, I am dry, and so because of that, I am absorbing all of the moisture that I can until I'm happy. We may not be happy because it may have been that we blow dried our hair or straightened our hair, and so we don't want it to have that moisture in that specific instance. But hydration to your hair is extremely important. Many Black women and women of color, we originate in climates that are high humid climates. So our hair is used to naturally being exposed and having moisture in the air that it can take in and get its nutrients that it needs. And so the reason why hydration is important is because water is going to be extremely key when it comes to one, hydration, like I said, and then water is also going to be important with transporting nutrients to cells. And so when it comes to our hair, and specifically our hair follicles, water is going to be key to transporting those nutrients to our hair follicles so that they have what they need to grow. So think about it, like I said in that seed example, like the fertilizer, it's giving you those nutrients and putting that into the soil that is your scalp so that your hair has what it needs to grow. Water is also going to be really important when it comes to your scalp in general. Your scalp may be dry because it's not being moisturized as sufficiently as it needs to be. And so when it comes to water, you need to be, and if you've heard me maybe on Instagram or even here on YouTube, you know I'm always preaching that there are 3 types of things that you need to do with your water. You need to eat your water. So that means consuming fruits and vegetables and foods that are going to be rich in water. You need to drink your water. So literally just drinking water. And then you need to allow your hair to take in water. So when it comes to your hair, the middle of your hair, or an innermost layer of your hair, I don't want to misspeak, an innermost layer of your hair is going to be called the cortex, and the outermost layer of your hair is going to be called the cuticle. And so when it's talking about hydrating your hair, when I'm talking about getting moisture into your hair, I'm talking about not just putting water or a product on the outside of your hair, which is going to be your cuticle. I'm talking about making sure that water is getting from the outside into the middle or the cortex of your hair. This is going to be absolutely essential and key to cellular growth. The next thing I want to talk about, and I touched on it slightly, is how water is going to impact your scalp. So when your scalp is not properly moisturized and hydrated, that's when you may see dandruff. And like I said, it's going to hinder hair growth in general. You may see your hair become brittle and prone to breakage because it's not getting the water into the actual cortex of your hair. So water, the very first thing of the 3 things that we're going to be talking about, is the number one thing, the number one reason why women are seeing that their hair is not growing as it should. You absolutely, positively need to make sure that you are getting enough water. If you're not, I can guarantee you that your hair is not growing at the rate that it could potentially grow at. So that's number 1, water. Number 2 and number 3 are going to be things where, unfortunately, we as Black women and women of color are going to be at a disadvantage. Anybody can drink water. Anybody can eat water. Anybody can do what it takes to make sure that water is getting into the cortex of your hair. But like I said, for 2 and 3, we are unfortunately at a disadvantage. And so number 2 is going to be iron. And unfortunately, studies have shown that Black women and women of color struggle with iron deficiencies. And so when it comes to iron and why it's important with your hair, is iron is going to be critical when it comes to hemoglobin. And so that's going to be one component of red blood cells, say that 3 times fast, that's going to carry oxygen to your hair follicles. So if your hair is not getting the oxygen that it needs, your cells are not getting the oxygen that it needs, that is going to negatively impact your hair growth, because having an adequate oxygen supply is going to ensure that your hair follicles basically have the energy that they need for healthy growth. So unfortunately, like I said, women of color, we tend to have iron deficiencies. We tend to suffer from anemia. And so anemia is basically when you have low iron levels, and that's reducing the amount of oxygen that's available for your hair follicles. And so just like water, if you don't get enough water, same thing with iron. If you're not getting enough iron, you're going to see your hair thinning. It's going to be dry, more brittle and prone to breakage and shedding. And unfortunately, low iron levels can also lead to hair loss. And so this is why it is so important, in addition to water, which is number one, that number two, you are checking your iron levels. So go visit your doctor, get your blood work done, and see where your iron levels are at to make sure that you have enough iron in your body. And if you aren't, talk to, again, your doctor or a nutritionist to see how best your body can take in iron. For years, I had struggled with anemia, and I was just told, oh, just take some iron pills. But for me personally, just taking any old iron pill wasn't what was best for me. It wasn't until that I was able to see a nutritionist and somebody who specialized in just eating clean that I was able to best determine how I can absorb iron naturally. And so for me, it's not just taking iron supplements, it's eating foods that are going to be rich in iron. So again, make sure that you are checking in, seeing where your iron levels are at, and if they are low, doing the steps and taking the steps necessary to increase your iron level, because iron, number two, is going to be so key and foundational when it comes to your hair growth. And last but not least, so I told you this is a 3-punch hitter. We talked about the importance of water. We talked about the importance of iron. And now we're going to talk about vitamin D. Heavy sigh. It wasn't until recently, most of my life I've known that, one, I don't drink enough water. Most of my life I've known that, two, I had a low iron levels, or I suffered from iron deficiency. But it wasn't until recently that I found out that I have vitamin D deficiencies. And like I said, 2 and 3 are things that we as Black women and women of color are at a disadvantage with. When it comes to vitamin D, many of us struggle with vitamin D. And so why vitamin D is so important is because it's going to help with regulating hair growth. So vitamin D is going to play a critical role in the creation of new hair follicles, right? So we have water, which is going to be helping to supply nutrients to the hair follicles. We have iron, which is going to be helping to supply oxygen to the hair follicles. And then lastly, we have vitamin D, which is going to be helping with just the overall creation of new hair follicles. So when it comes to hair and hair growth, hair grows in different phases and stages. And so I'm not going to get into all of the different phases and stages. That will likely be another YouTube video that you see come down the line. But one of the transitions is your hair will go from a resting phase into a growth phase. And vitamin D is going to be so critical in taking your hair from that resting phase, where basically it's not growing, into that growth phase. And this is after the hair has shed. So it goes through the cycles of hair growth. It's going to shed, which is where your hair will naturally just shed out of your hair. It's not a meaning that there's something wrong with your hair. It's just a natural process, because it's the old hair coming out and making room for new growth. So your hair will shed, your hair will rest, and then it will grow. And so if you aren't getting sufficient vitamin D, once your hair sheds and goes into that resting phase, it then struggles to go into the growth phase. And so what you see is a lot of shedding, and not that shedding being replaced with new hair growth. And vitamin D is also super important when it comes to our immune system, which can also help with maintaining a healthy scalp and the environment of your scalp. So taking it back to our seed example, if your soil is not doesn't have the nutrients that it needs, and if it's not getting enough of the fertilizers, which are going to help with adding to the nutrients, you're not going to see the growth. And so if your immune system is weakened, which again, vitamin D is going to be helping with that, then that's where you will see your hair growth be negatively impacted. And so some of the ways that you can see that is vitamin D disrupting the hair follicle cycle, which is what I talked about, where it just stays in that resting phase and doesn't grow. You'll see a little bit more shedding than you would like. And with the hair shedding and vitamin D, an interesting fact is that vitamin D and lack of vitamin D can be a source of and contribute to certain conditions such as alopecia. But vitamin D can also cause your hair to be weakened, just like the iron in water, where you'll see thinning of the hair, a weakened strand of hair, and it can make your hair more prone to breakage and damage. And so these are many of the 3 reasons why we as Black women and women of color are struggling when it comes to hair growth, is because we don't realize just how important getting enough water is. We don't know how important and realize how important ensuring that we have enough iron is. We don't realize that just by us going out into the sun is a major way that people get and receive vitamin D, but unfortunately our melanin makes it harder for us to get the vitamin D from the sun. So we have to take extra steps in order to make sure that we're getting sufficient vitamin D, which is the 3rd one. So if we just take a step back and analyze, am I drinking enough water? Am I eating, drinking, and absorbing water? Am I getting enough iron? Am I getting enough vitamin D? Those are 3 foundational things that are going to help the seed that is our hair and the seed of hair growth, that are going to be super impactful with our hair follicles. And you will start to see a change in your hair growth if you take the time and dedication to really focus on ensuring that you are doing what you can to get sufficient water, to make sure your iron levels are where they should be, and that your vitamin D is also where it should be. So those are three easy steps and things that you can do and reasons why you're struggling with hair growth. But because we've talked about it, you're not going to struggle no more. You're going to do what you need to do, and you're going to take some of the steps that we talked about today to ensure that you are where you're at when it comes to those 3 things. So this is Christine. I hope that you enjoyed this week's video. This is a friendly reminder to like, share, and subscribe, because how else will you continue to get all of this amazing natural hair information if you aren't liking, sharing, and subscribing? Don't be stingy. There are other naturalistas and friends that need this information, so share this information with them so that they can be empowered to see the same type of hair growth that you're going to see because you now know this information. So again, this is Christine. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.